Welcome, everyone. I'm Blossom Beatty Piddock. I'm a senior consultant here with 6 Seconds, and I'm really grateful to be here today to have this discussion with you all. It's the end of August, and this discussion is very timely because this is a time when, in the world of schools and education, we are typically starting a new year. And having spent my whole life in schools as a teacher, an educator, a school leader, I know that one of the aspects of the work I treasured is the excitement and hope and possibility of that fresh start. But lately, it's been increasingly difficult, in my experience at least, to feel that sense of hope and possibility to renew and re-energize ourselves as educators. The challenges of the 2020s, 3 years in, though we are only, those challenges have been relentless and have hit educators and young people they support with particular force. Pandemic, post-pandemic, racial justice reckoning, accelerating climate change impacts, mental health crises, political polarization, culture wars, curriculum wars, and the list goes on. I was talking to a teacher the other day who said that in her school's opening meetings, she and her colleagues were using the word exhaustigized to describe how they were feeling as they started this new year. Exhausted and searching for the energy for all of the good work that they want to do. But it's difficult. So today we want to focus on practical strategies and insights to support education in prioritizing well-being, to support educators in prioritizing well-being in what is truly a challenging landscape. And I'm so pleased to welcome this wonderful panel that we have today, folks who have great experience and expertise, and welcome them to exploring this question of how to support educators. And so I hope that you all can introduce yourselves and then give one or two words to describe what you're seeing and hearing from educators right now. Does that sound okay, Kaylin and Margaret? And we are waiting for one more presenter. He's coming from another session. So we'll be welcoming Michael in a few minutes. But Kaylin, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. My name is Kaylin Fullerton. I am currently in Jakarta, Indonesia. I've spent most of my teaching career in international schools and am now an educational consultant with my company Upstream Collaborative. And until very recently, I was in schools as well, so have definitely been experiencing this shift and this sort of disconnect that we find ourselves in. So yeah, I would say, what are we seeing? We're seeing a lot of demoralization. We're seeing a lot of exhaustion, a real lack of optimism from educators, unfortunately. So I'm excited to speak with you all today about what we're seeing, where that's coming from, and where we might go next.
Thank you, Caitlin. Margaret, can I hand it over to you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Margaret Golden, and I've been an educator for many years, everything from elementary, middle, little kids, and then a long time spent as a teacher educator. And I'm now working for the Greater Good Science Center here at UC Berkeley. We're really trying to reach out to as many educators as we can to provide resources for them to create their own space of well-being, as well as to create communities of support for teachers so that they have a place to go to talk and to be held in a way that they can be authentic and vulnerable with all the pressure and try to keep their hope alive. And I think what I'm hearing and seeing right now is a lot of overwhelm, wanting it to be so good and being very excited, and then just kind of overwhelmed with all the challenges in front of them.
Thank you, Margaret. Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
So we're having folks introduce themselves and just say a couple of words that describe what you're seeing and hearing from the educators that you're working with right now.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you all in the midst of technology issues. As I'm working with teachers and leaders across the country, one of the things that I'm seeing is this idea and notion that we can do it alone. And that really has been manifesting downward to students. I just left a workshop with some college students, and this idea that I have the ability to do it on my own. And I think that bar is being set so high that the expectations are through the roof, and individuals just can't do it. And so one of the things that I'm seeing is this sense that I'm going it alone.
Thank you for that. This is powerful insights from all three of you. Demoralization, overwhelm, along with excitement, right? Part of that, as I was describing, someone saying exhaustigized, right? They're exhausted and yet energized with what they want to do. And Michael, as you described, that sense of aloneness, of isolation, that I can and I will go it alone. So I wonder, what, from your perspective, I mean, we're hearing so much about burnout. The RAND study with the National Education Association found that U.S. teachers and principals are experiencing frequent job-related stress at a rate about twice that of the general population of working adults. And well-being is reported as particularly poor amongst Latinx teachers, mid-career teachers, and female teachers and principals, right? There's so much news that we hear about the pressures that teachers are under. And I wonder, from your perspective and experience, what you think some of the key drivers are of this sense of overwhelm, exhaustion, burnout. What's behind this from your experience?
I'm
Michael,
happy to jump in.
Great.
I think it's really that the systems and the structures don't fit anymore. We have created, and we have a greater understanding of what's needed, what learning is, what kids need to be held emotionally as well as academically, and teachers need the same thing. And the systems that have them lined up coming in at a certain time, sitting in certain ways, all doing the same thing, and each teacher being isolated, as Michael said, thinking that they've got to do this for this group of kids without this community of support. I think that's a big driver right there.
Any other insights? Or Michael, it's you.
Yes, just thinking about teachers, and Blossom, you and I just came fresh off of a workshop with a group of teachers just the other day. And one of the things that we talked about is, what do we help teachers to be, what can teachers be aware of about themselves? And just the idea that there's a lack of trust sometimes, that also goes along with lack of self-care, something that we're seeing in a tremendous way. And so also lack of confidence. I think sometimes in education, teachers come into organizations with lots of energy, and because of those systems that we've talked about, those systems make us small because this is what you have to accomplish. And so the creativity begins to get whittled down. So I think the idea that we're taking away creativity, and so because of that, teachers are not feeling that sense of self-agency.
Kaylin, were you going to?
Yeah, I think to kind of echo and add on, systems is definitely the word that comes up for me. And I think a lot of what we see sometimes makes educators feel like it's an individual problem. Like I know, teaching through the pandemic, it's like, well, you should do more yoga, you should breathe more. And yeah. And what's going to change about the job, right? Not what's going to change about me necessarily. And so I think we're seeing educators are feeling squeezed, really. There's a lack of autonomy. There's a huge workload. There's a lot of times when you're not feeling safe and seen at work, and it piles up.
Absolutely. So along the line of maybe a place for us to start as we move towards talking about practically how educators can support art with that sense of systems. If you all were sitting down with a school leader, with a superintendent, with someone who had the power to shift some of these aspects, what would be your first piece of advice for how what changes they make or what actions they can take in order to support the well-being of the educators with whom they're working. Michael, you want to start us off?
Sure, I'd be glad to. I feel really, I just didn't say this before, so honored to be with my colleagues on this call also. And when we think about work with senior leaders, one of the things that I feel really honored about working with 6 Seconds is we talk about leadership, building leadership capacity. And so one thing that I talk with leaders about is what's your Achilles heel? Primarily because I tore my own Achilles heel while playing basketball with ninth graders many years ago. But I try to frame it to say, what's that thing that's causing you lack of sleep? Mm. And then when we use some of the tools through 6 Seconds, we use this quadrant model. And we ask, what's the long-term goal of what you want to accomplish with your faculty in the here and now? And then, well, what's the short term? So the long term, the short term, and something that's really important is who are the people that will help you to do that? And I think sometimes a lot of leaders say, well, I'm growing leaders, or I can't trust a leader, so I'm going to do it myself. So the reason why we take them through the system of what's the long-term goal, what's the short term, and who are the people, because when we think about who the people are, you may have a group of leaders in place that are good people, may not be ready for that job. And so how do we develop them in a way that will support the work? And then after we go from the long term, the short term, who are the people, what are the systems? And we use these 4 ideas to help the leader come up with what's inside of them, because they have this compass that is inside. We talk about all change starts within. So some of the advice that I would be sharing first is what's your Achilles heel? And then I'd walk them through that long term, short term. Who are those people that are helping you? And then how can the systems move that model together?
Back to our not going it alone idea.
Yeah, I really relate to that. One thing that I really like to call on and bring people's awareness to is the research that's been done about what makes school cultures impactful and effective. And it doesn't mean any particular one kind of curriculum or philosophy. It has to have relational trust among the people that work there. So that idea that a school can create relational trust among the staff so that they can be vulnerable, they can say what's wrong, they can be honest with themselves and with one another. And how you do that, how you get to that place of trust, is a really important question to ask leaders. How are you creating trust in your school site? And there's some ways to do that, but it takes time, and it takes an effort and a focus on that being an outcome that's very important, that the trust itself. And then that comes into classrooms as well. So teachers then can do that same thing with students.
That resonates so deeply with me and Michael. I know with the work that we do at 6 Seconds with schools and with school leaders, thinking about trust at the center. Trust at the center. Kaylin.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in and say that exactly. It's almost, this mirror of what you're doing in the classroom, right? And everything we would say to educators about, developing their own self-awareness and their own skills so that they can be models for teachers. The same goes for leaders. And so the leaders, first thing first, need to really be taking care of themselves, curious about what's going on for them, about developing their own well-being, so that they can model that out and build, as you were all saying, that sense of relational trust, that sense of being able to be curious about who your staff is, what are they working on, what's the expertise here in the building, so that, again, we're talking about systems, that we're not working in this hierarchical system, but it's a team, right? We're a community.
Absolutely. Michael, yeah.
Kaylin, I really love what you said about how are we working with those people to what's the skill in the building? And I think that is an untapped resource for a lot of leaders. If we, as we're reflecting on ourselves, who are those people that we're working with, those junior and newcomers and also senior people, how do we tool them? Because by doing that, it really helps us to live a little bit longer. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
And I think even as we think of on the individual level, one of the things that 6 Seconds is looking at is how do we understand burnout, or that sense of, right, we are overwhelmed, we can do no more, and looking at, some drivers of it being our capacity for optimism, right? To believe that there's possibility, that there's choice, that we have some agency in our own situations, and our sense of purpose, and then also our sense of connection. Do we feel that sense that we are connected to others? And I think that really speaks to some of the issues that you all are talking about, that undergird that sense of trust and our capacity to lean on one another, which can feel so difficult. So one of the things that I hear all the time when I'm in schools, and I'm sure said several times myself as an educational leader, is to use this language from airline safety of, put your oxygen mask on before helping others. And yet, in my experience, it's often the opposite of what we all do. And obviously those who are drawn to this space, to education, to working with young people, to working with other educators, that makes sense. But I wonder how we can interrupt that pattern. What your thoughts are for maybe folks who are listening who can see that that's a pattern that they have. They know they need to take care of themselves, but first, and make sure that their cup is full. But it's hard to prioritize that. How can we help folks think about prioritizing their self-care?
I can jump in. I think really the answer is in the question, right? That recognizing that it's a pattern is a really revolutionary thing for some of us. And I think that there's a huge culture. I know I did it all the time myself, and I'm still working on myself as a teacher. There's this kind of martyr narrative, right? Like my students can't go on without me, and we drag ourselves in, sore throats and snotty nose, and we're like, but I'm here, and you have me, don't worry. And so just being able to recognize these patterns in our thinking and our feeling and our acting, and that's the beauty, right? Once you recognize, then you can start to make the choice to change. So we have to know what's happening, check in with ourselves, and then I think that giving yourself permission, right? Knowing that I give myself permission to take a sick day if I need it, or to, close the laptop at 7 p.m. and have dinner and go for a walk, even if, everything's not perfect for tomorrow, because it's never going to be. But we need for us to be at our best in order for our students to be able to be at our best.
Yeah, Kaylin, you're so right. Teachers don't want to. They're always driving to get, help everyone else, and they come last. And it is a culture shift. And I think that if we can provide them with some tools and some experiences where it makes a really big difference, if they learn how to take a mindful breath and how to take a pause during the day, what's the impact on my relationship with that kid where I'm really struggling? Or if I know that I can have some experiences right now, we have a big push for awe, and how just having this experience of awe of the daily life. And again, bringing that into your classroom. So you're not just doing it alone. You can have awe with your kids, and it comes to you too. So you can do things in your classroom with your students that are good for all of you. Taking that breath, teaching kids how to do that. Taking some time for self-compassion and realizing it doesn't take much to say, oh, this is a moment of suffering for me, and to model that for kids so that they can say, yeah, this is really hard. What do I need? Can I take a breath? Everybody gets like this sometimes. And some self-talk, about positive self-talk for yourself. We just know so much about how important and how beneficial that is, but to actually give opportunities to try it. That's why the leadership providing that is really important, so teachers feel they can do it.
Oh. Yeah, Margaret, I would just add, as we're thinking about it, a lot of the work is coaching. We see all across schools, K-20, where all types of coaches are coming up. And I think it's a really innovative idea and important. So one of the things that we could talk with senior leaders and or teachers about is, well, what does the organization lose when you don't take care of yourself?
Mm.
And I just ask that question and I pause, because what we're doing is we're engaging them, the cognitive stuff, to go, what happens there? It's both thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
And what we talk about is how do we take our thoughts and our feelings to make powerful choices? And after we, where everyone likes to go outward first. So we go outward, then we go, well, what does the organization, what do you lose when you don't take care of yourself? And a lot of times that question is startling for the individual, because it's like, well, I get to take care of myself. And you get to look in the eyes of teachers and you hear, I get to take care of myself. And we really need to couple systems, empathetic, compassionate systems that allow people to reflect. And so the questions would be, one, what does the organization lose when you don't take care of yourself? And equally important, what do you lose when you don't take care of yourself? And the flip side of that is, what do they gain and what do you gain?
Michael, please, Kaylin.
No, I was just going to jump in. One of my favorite quotes is that Grace Lee Boggs, transform yourself to transform the world. And I think that's, if we shift that way, beautiful.
And such a powerful transformation for educators too, to I think, consider and hold that self-compassion piece along the lines of transform ourselves so we can transform others. I think, Michael, of being in the room with teachers when we had them explore, this was just the other day, explore the kind of compassion that they offer to students when a student has made a mistake, and then asking them how they talk to themselves when they make a mistake, and how quiet the room was, that I think reflecting, and I think this is an experience that I often have in work with teachers, that sense of, is that allowed? Am I allowed to offer myself that compassion, or perhaps am I taking it from someone else, or is it where is it taking away when really what it's doing is giving so much, right? For young people to see that modeled, I think, is powerful.
That's so great. I do want to point to, there's some really good research around what do kids say they want from a teacher, right? And they want care and, in their words, but they're saying they want presence. They want somebody who sees them. They want to be seen. And a teacher can only do that when they're regulated enough to be present for kids. So self-regulation is such an important thing for teachers more than anyone in the classroom, because they're the ones who are going to be the anchor for everyone else along the way.
So true. And as teachers, we, I think, often, because of the systems we're in, focus so much on mastering our content and skipping over this piece of content that is so essential in any space of learning. And so, I often say to teachers, when it comes to things like feelings and self-care and compassion, this is part of where we have to lean into mastery of content, because of course it's going to be the content of a classroom space. How could it not be, when we're humans interacting in this profound and actually quite fundamental way? So when we think about, you brought up the sense, Margaret, of what kids want is to be seen, right? And to be seen, to be known, to have that sense of belonging. And my sense is that that's what we as educators need as well, right? Again, to mirror that, to reflect, to use your language, Kaylin. And there's so much data out there about, but what the impact is of not having that sense of belonging. And again, the RAND NEA study that I referenced before, another, I think, key piece of data from that is that 36% of teachers of color had experienced at least one incident of racial discrimination in the 2020-2021 school year. 43% of teachers exposed to discrimination reported symptoms of depression, compared with 25% of their peers who had not experienced these incidents. And similarly to the rate of burnout, amongst our colleagues in the BIPOC community. And I wonder, from your perspective, how does identity intersect with this question of well-being for educators? And we know sense of belonging is a key factor for our students, but what's the role for our teachers? You want to step in? Oh, Michael, you want to step in there?
Sure. It's always funny, sometimes the person of color answers first in a joking way, and also I think what's powerful is that we see each other, right? And how I think it's equally important for people of color to see themselves as well as for white people. And how do we frame that? And so I think the connection between being seen and one's identity is really critical. And one way that we do that, I hear a little bit of an echo. I'm not sure if that's me. I think one way to kind of counter that is to bring it up. So I was in a workshop just 15 minutes ago, and there is a racial issue at this organization that I'm working with. We had them to we did this human being activity, basically where we asked the participants to draw a picture of a human being and say thinking about the ways that they walk through the world. And so as I've been doing work with my colleague and friend Josh Friedman, we've been thinking about how do you hone in on to not just your race or gender, but the ways that you walk through the world. So thinking about the ways that you walk through the world, create this human being. So a head, a heart, and hands and feet. And what are the things that those individuals are thinking? And you give them time to do that. And what are the things that those individuals are feeling? You give them time to do that. And what are they doing? One way to center identity is to give the participants the opportunity to do that. Because if the expert or the person facilitating in front of the room, if I'm the only one that can do it, if only a Black person can do it, then there's no hope for a white person. Or if only a woman can do it, there's no possibility for someone who's a part of the LGBT community or someone who's non-binary. So I think giving opportunities for adults and also students to actually create images that capture their thoughts, their feelings, and actions is one way to center the work towards practical goals.
Thank you, Michael. I got an image of that happening in the room and found how powerful it was. I'd add that, our identities, we bring them with us everywhere, and there's multifaceted components of us. We aren't just all one thing. And I love John Powell's work at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley, when he talks about belonging, but he doesn't just say it's all about belonging. He says it's about othering, because a lot of people belong by othering someone else, right? So how can we create spaces where everybody belongs? That means everybody. It doesn't mean just centering it on the people of color in the room. It means equity for everyone, but it also means everybody has an opportunity to be a human being in that room and to share their hopes, dreams, thoughts, and the things that they're worried about. And I think an exercise like Michael was saying, one way we get at it sometimes I've done in the past is to use a Mobius strip and have people write on the inside, what's all the stuff on the inside about who I am? And then turn that thing. And on the other side, write, what are all the things that come at me from the outside world that I have to navigate? And then to twist that and see the inner and the outer and how they're related. If you can imagine a Mobius strip in your head. That's something that I learned from one of my mentors, Parker Palmer, who really has talked a lot about this idea of our inner world really impacts our outer world, and the outer world really impacts our identity. So what are the ways in which those things coalesce with one another, and how can we share that so we can see each other as fully human, each of us?
Oh, you're muted, Blossom.
I just said I love the Mobius strip as well. I can also imagine that, Kaylin.
No, I was just gonna kind of echo, because I think teaching is an interesting and I would say fairly unique profession in where you have this real kind of meshing of personal and professional identity, and you have to bring both. And we know with any aspect of identity, I think probably most of us in the room have experienced having to put one part of ourselves down at some point, right? And that word, again, I think is demoralization, when you're not able to fully express yourself, your values, your purpose, who you are in some way. And I think schools are a really interesting place because you have to bring your whole self. We're talking about modeling for children who are the future, and they're smart. They can tell if you're not fully there and fully relational being. But again, because of what's happening with all these systems pressures, a lot of people are feeling like they can't bring their whole selves. And I think that's when you start to feel that disconnect, that lack of belonging, which really hurts our communities.
Kaylin, you brought something that really jogged my memory. As we're thinking about schools as systems, it feels like we're going countercultural, because when we look to the early parts of education, specifically when we think about indigenous people as they were being trained, it says, let's take out the savage but leave the man. So what we're doing, even though it is a powerful learning experience, it's really a countercultural experience. Systems were designed for people that they worked with. And so a lot of the exhaustion is that many of us, however we identify kind of the greater good for society, is we're going against the grain of how educational systems were created. And I think it's really important for us to call that out, not to call that up, not call it out, because any of us can stand in the gap to facilitate. I think the power of the work that we all do is that not any one of us can do it. We bring our full selves. However, the systems have said, if you're a woman, don't bring that. If you're part of the LGBT community, don't bring that. If you're a Black man, don't bring that. So I think we also have to call that into the conversation, because in that, it is also freeing. And I think that's a really important piece that I just wanted to offer. Kaylin, thank you for saying that, because I wouldn't have thought of it. So I appreciate you.
Can we offer those who are listening to this conversation maybe a means of how do we call that up, or in those moments, whether it's on our own behalf or in standing shoulder to shoulder with others? But I imagine, a teacher feeling like, yeah, I'm in an environment where that conversation is not happening, and I don't know how to make it happen. I don't know. And the system doesn't seem to be changing, and yet here I am. This is my reality. Any thoughts?
This was me, and so I think you got to find your people. You got to do everything you can to find your people, and that's not always going to be in your school. And and so you look outward and you find people who are doing the work that inspires you, and you make those connections. And that's, I love to hate and hate to love the internet, but I will say there's so much out there now where we can make those connections, even, if we can make it with somebody who's beside us, in the classroom next to us, or our leadership there. I mean, that's amazing. And that's a wonderful thing, but I know that's not always accessible for all of us. And so if we're making it with each other across the pond, that can really help to ground you as you're pushing that boulder up the hill and trying to change education from, as you said, Michael, what it started, and trying to make it into something new.
Thank you, Kaylin. I'm just going to put a plug in the chat for, if I can figure out how to do that. I have to connect first. No? Do I have to connect to the chat? Anyway, I have a link in the chat I can put to so a community of practice that we've just begun. We had one this summer. It was beautiful. We had about 60 people from around the world of educators. We call it Honoring the Teacher's Heart, Wellbeing Practices for School Change. Because people who want to be in this movement, they don't necessarily find it in their school, and you have to find your people. I love that phrase. Kaylin. Find your people. We need tenacious communities of support and people that can keep our hearts alive and engaged, and people to listen and people to hear us speak. So I'll put that, when I figure out how to do it, I'll put the link in the chat. We're going to start a new one in November. Hope you can join us.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think even if we get it in, if one of the folks who's helping us on the back end can probably get that into the chat as well. But I think that these ideas really speak to that, the notion of putting one's own oxygen mask. Oh, there it is. All right, we got it up. One's own oxygen mask on first, having the community of support, finding your people, and really being able to lean on others and counteract that narrative of isolation and aloneness. All right. So as we think, again, even getting to this sense of how our own experiences is mirrored by our students, and we're mirroring it for them, some of the realities around, the mental health crisis for young people. And I wonder how, if there are shifts that we can make in our classroom or in our own practices that might create greater well-being for everyone. What are some of those strategies or practical aspects of what we can do in the classroom, recognizing that we are in a landscape where there's a lot of suffering amongst young people, and there's just not enough support for them. You see the data about how many folks there are young people who need, a therapist, need mental health support, and how few there are for each one of those, individuals. So I wonder what can we be doing in our classrooms that can create, again, not just well-being for them, but for everyone who is participating in those spaces. Margaret, you want to get us going?
Sure. I love this question because it's kind of what we're about at the Greater Good right now. And I think ways in which we can help kids be kind to one another, lots of wonderful activities and resources you can find on our website about kindness. The other is how much we know gratitude is a really grounding force, and that we can do practices, and we know just taking account of what are we grateful for, not to discount that the difficulties aren't there. As a matter of fact, the difficulties will always be there. So it's the gratitude that we have to lean into, because it's going to change our neural networks. It's going to change the way that we think about things if we can stay focused on what we're grateful for. And there's all sorts of ways you can do that in a classroom with kids. And you can participate as a teacher. You can participate as a principal. You can lead that effort at your school to have a focus on compassion, on gratitude, on forgiveness, on dealing with our anxiety. Like, what's it like? What can we do to ground ourselves in mindful practices that are things that everyone can get on board with if they're a human being? Breathing, experiencing awe, movement. I mean, all sorts of things that we can do together that kind of keep hope alive for everybody in the room.
Thank you for that. Michael, did you?
Sure. It's because this is a conversation, it's always good to be in rooms with colleagues, because you get a chance to, as you're listening to something, like, oh yeah, that's the other thing I was thinking about. And I just so appreciate, again, having this forum, because as we're getting back to school, many people might have a chance to listen at some of the things that we're talking about. And I hope that you all will avail yourselves to the resources. A couple of the things that came to mind are, one, there's an activity that we did this summer as we were teaching at Columbia University with some of their summer principal academy students, is even having something as basic as a cup, 10 cups in front of the room, and have it labeled 1 to 10. 1 is you're having a terrible day. 10 is you're feeling ecstatic. And we had the students to write their names, and they had a chance to put it in those cups. So at each unit, we had a chance to get some ready data And I really appreciate, as Margaret, as you're in kind of in every few comments, you're adding that there's data, because we're not just talking about things that we feel. There's some data driven, and a lot of our educational institutions want the data. So we use that 1 to 10. The student puts their popsicle stick with their name, and they design it. Even adults have done that, and it gives the leader time to know where they are, but also the leader gets to do that. I think that's one practical way that could be utilized that we found at 6 seconds to be successful with both children as well as adults.
Mm.
Yeah, both of you spoke to the leader and the teacher being part of these practices, and I think that's really what we're trying to drive home today, right? Is go find out for yourself, and you're, even without doing one thing different in your classroom, if you're going to explore your own self-awareness, your own regulation, you're gonna really notice changes. I think in this day and age, again, it's all about helping our students to be seen. And so, that practice that you said, Michael, having some sort of check-in at the beginning of the day, really making an effort to know our students and who they are, and just helping them to feel seen, acknowledged that they're there. We know we're hearing all of the statistics about the mental health crisis, about the loneliness epidemic. And this all comes from us, I think, this hyper individualization and what we said earlier, right? I can do it all on myself, but why? Why? What's the point of that? And so building that community, helping to build safe spaces, I think also recognizing to not, have teachers who are watching this, get help, because for the most part, 99% of us are not trained mental health professionals. And I think this also adds to the, the martyr syndrome, I got to do it all myself, right? So get help. And also, if and when you have the time, learn about SEL, learn about mindfulness, learn about trauma-informed and culturally responsive practices. The more you can know and kind of incorporate those things into who you are and into your classroom, help those students be seen.
Mm.
Blossom, Kaylin just said something that I think is very lovely, that there's a way we can help students specifically, because a lot of times we work with teachers. When we're talking about students' cultures, oftentimes I'll just say, let's put on the wall who our students are, because it allows them to tell us who they are. So, tell me your favorite thing about your family. Tell me something that you enjoy eating. Tell me a feeling that you have, because we begin to fill the walls with the students, which in a lot of ways helps the teacher not have to dig so hard, because if we create those mental models for students, it's very powerful. But also I was thinking about something that we use that's called Plutchik's model of feelings. And even if it's advanced for maybe a smaller child, the colors have meanings. And so even allowing students to say, well, what color are you doing? I know that there's the ruler does some things about the model, the mentor meter, and how you're not the mentor meter, but the model of the moment which you're feeling. How do you tell people how you're feeling, and to normalize that that's what we are doing on the way to excellent learning? I think some of those ideas might be helpful. And it's called the mood meter, not the mentor meter.
You mentor with the mood meter. I was going to say, I worked most of my career and continue to with really young children, right? And they can do this. They can and they will, and all the way from our 3-year-olds all the way up to our eldest students, just having those different models to be able to recognize, what am I feeling, and where is it in my body? What's the color? What's the shape? What's the I don't know, texture I would give to this, and then letting them be a part of creating that as well. They come up with better ideas than you ever would, right? And I was thinking when Michael was talking about the cups, I had just a continuum line, on my board with when I had second graders, and we just had, are you kind of neutral? What level of pleasant are you feeling? What level of unpleasant? And eventually I never had to write it, and we were getting like the most amazing, wacky feeling words, taking up the entire board, like 20 different options that you could stick yourself up on at the beginning of the day after recess, and just having them be a part of that is really powerful also.
I'm just going to chime into both of those things around the feelings and the emotions. Like we're not good at it, of knowing what the emotions are, or naming our own emotions as educators. So it is kind of the base skill for emotional intelligence. It's being able to name what they are. And Dacher Keltner and others at UC Berkeley have identified 27 distinct emotions, right? And giving kids the vocabulary. It's also academic, you can grow the vocabulary, your emotional vocabulary. Then, the idea that if you name it, you can tame it, right? So you gotta be able to say it, know what it is, get granular with your emotions, and then look at how culture impacts that. We know that there's human emotions that go across cultures, but the way we express them, or way that our culture thinks things are appropriate or not appropriate, that can challenge, our ideas about what emotions are. So those are good discussions to have with kids about how do they see emotions and how does it feel? What color are you today? There's a book about that I think is awesome to use with younger ones.
Yeah, just see the quote there from Josh, feel it to heal it. And I think what we're talking about are all ways of creating spaces where individuals, including the educators, can bring their whole selves to the space. And so as we, I think of working on the other end of the age spectrum, Kaylin, with, older high school kids, where people are often like, oh yeah, they don't want any of that hokey stuff, right? You'll lose a teenager. But, having a deck of moon face cards with, these moon faces that have all of these different emotions. And I would ask kids to pick one out as they came into the room, and put it on your desk. And it's a way of saying these aspects of who you are welcome. They are invited here. They are welcome here. In fact, they are necessary for the work that we're going to be doing, for us to understand that with one another. And I do think that ties into this sense of how are we messaging that we ourselves, we can create spaces that we as educators are in, that are supporting our well-being, the well-being of those we're working with, and also inviting the whole self, and starting to invite sense of identity and the entire package of who we are as part of the work that we're doing together. So I think that the idea that we're normalizing this talk about how we're feeling, how are we doing, and I think, as you're describing, Kaylin, also invites in the possibility for it's all of the emotions that we're experiencing, all of the realities of who we are, and it isn't all gloom and doom all the time. None of us would stay in this profession without those moments, as you're describing, Margaret, of awe and of great joy, and the moment when we feel so inspired by the act of learning and learning alongside others. I wonder what in this moment is giving you all hope in this whole world of learning, of teaching, of working with young people, of supporting educators and educational leaders. Where's your sense of hope? Kaylin, you want to get us started?
The young people. Mm-hmm. I mean, for the most part, no matter how heavy it all feels, you get inside the room with those young people, however, young or old young people they are, and you feel inspired again.
I'll tag onto that as well. One of my daughters is in her third year of teaching first grade here in the Bay Area, and she's got a little United Nations in that class, and they are just awesome. Whenever I'm having a day where I'm thinking, I just wander on in, and her mom comes into the room, and I spend half an hour with those kids, and it changes my mood. It changes my emotional stance. And I think that that's what kids need to know too, is like, yeah, you might be feeling really hard right now. And if we make space for you to express what you're feeling right now, it's going to change. And there, you have an opportunity to feel something different. We're not going to just giving you space. That's the paradox of it, right? Of having those other feelings. Joy can come in, and they can understand that it doesn't always have to be that way. My feelings and my emotions can change, and I have control over that, so some degree of agency there. And I love that with the little ones. They do it for me, so they give me hope.
Yeah, and as I was thinking about what's giving me hope, what came to mind first was that the movie Inside Out. And because we're in a live, video, sometimes your brain is having so many thoughts. When it came to my mind, this Inside Out, and what's giving me hope is vulnerability. So I, as an educational leader, can choose. It has to come into my awareness, and then I get to choose to do something different. And when I choose to ask the difficult question with compassion, what gives me hope is that vulnerability that opens up. And it's something that has to start inside of me. I can't ask the students to do it if I haven't done it. So what's giving me hope right now is that vulnerability is a powerful tool. But that doesn't mean say everything, right? Figuring out what's the right cadence, but being vulnerable and saying, just like the movie Inside Out, every emotion, it's not good or bad, it's data. And if we can get strong enough or develop the capacity to handle that data, I really believe it's going to give us the kind of results that we all are pursuing.
Beautiful. I love that.
I have a lot of hope too. And just being with y'all today, this conversation, meeting Michael and Kaylin and Blossom, this has been quite lovely, and it's definitely buoyed me from my day today. So thank you.
I think it's such an important reminder. We started off talking about how isolating this profession can be, right? We are oftentimes, we're even alone in our rooms working with young people, right? And so those opportunities, as difficult as they can seem, to reach out, to make the connection, to step outside of that sense of aloneness. Because I too, Margaret, feel buoyed by hearing others talk and recognizing that we face some of the same challenges, and we also are drawing from the same essential sense of purpose, I think, in our work with young people. And it's so powerful to feel others who have that. So I would love to hear, as we sort of close out, I'd love to leave people with some of, your favorite strategies for supporting well-being as a teacher, as a educational leader. What would you like to leave folks with? Small, big, anywhere in between, but some of those practices that maybe they could think, I'll give that a try. Kaylin, you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm a huge advocate of mindfulness as the foundation for well-being practices. And that doesn't mean, I'm telling you to go out and sit crisscross and meditate for 45 minutes every day, because we're teachers. But just what we pointed to before, I think, Margaret, you pointed to it, the pause, right? Just so much of our day is go, 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 go. Do, and there's no pausing. And so being able to develop that awareness a little bit, whenever we can, whether it's linked with, those few and far between bathroom breaks, right? Like just taking a minute to pause, check in with your body. We're not very good at doing this, and a lot of times that's where our feelings show up first. What are these feelings telling me? And what do I need right now? What's the next step? And if we can do that in little 1-minute spurts, or even just finding a quiet space to sit down for 5 minutes a day, even if you want to go out and find one of the billions of apps or YouTube videos that give you some guided practice, just take a minute to build that awareness.
Thank you.
And
Michael,
Kate,
you-
sure, I'll jump in. It's really wonderful to build off of each other. It is amazing. There is one of the tools that I use that take just really a short amount of time. Is actually a tool that 6 Seconds has developed. It's called a TFA, the thoughts, feelings, and actions. And have someone, if they don't, we have some online tools that I'm sure one of our team can put in the chat, but you can put a T, an F, and an A. What are the thoughts that you're having in this moment? The kid is not listening. The administrator is not doing what they're doing. Your spouse, the cat, the dog. What are some thoughts in that moment? Then what are some of the feelings you're having? Because I've discovered that sometimes someone says, Michael, how do you feel? And I'm sharing thoughts. So what are my thoughts and what are my feelings? And then the third piece is, after I've went through my thoughts and my feelings in just a couple of minutes, what's something I'm going to commit to? What's the action that I'm going to commit to? Because as you said, Kaylin, teachers have few and far between moments between getting the kids in line and going into the bathroom. That mental idea of TFA, what do I need to be thinking about? What am I feeling? And what will I act? Allows us to make judgments more powerfully where we take our head, our heart, and our hands. So that TFA model, and I think someone just put that tool in the chat, has been very helpful for me.
Yes, we've got that tool in the chat, and some other folks are talking about some of the things that have been powerful for them. Embracing vulnerability can lead to deeper connections with others, increased empathy and personal growth, allowing us to create atmospheres for students to understand self, to embrace new ways of thinking. Some of the things that are giving folks hope. The TFA is in there. The other thing I'd say, Michael, about the thoughts, feelings, actions too, is it can sort of, it can also help us see patterns, right? We can start to see that, oh yeah, when I have this thought or when I have this feeling, these are some of the, this is the action I tend to take. And that maybe is something that I want to try something different. And that TFA tool can really help us almost imagine what we would, what we might change if we were doing something differently. Margaret.
Yeah, that was beautiful. I like that very much. That's very powerful practice. I think it points to this integration of this, that we need everybody to have their heart, their head, and their bodies to be integrated so that we know where we are, and we know we are powerful when we're integrated, right? We can move in one direction. And I think the thing that I have found most powerful recently with teachers and with myself, and I started with this and I'll end with it, is self-compassion. I think it's a practice that we can notice, particularly those of us in the caring professions. We are caring for everyone else. So how can we care for ourselves? So what's a simple way? What would I say to myself if in that moment when I know I need an action, I actually need to be cared for? So I actually have the power to do that for myself. And I think self-compassion can allow us to then move more compassionately towards other people, because we can't be that way if we're not compassionate towards ourselves. So it's the window in.
That is so, so true. Well, always too little time. There's, 100 of other topics and questions that I would like to ask you all. I want to thank you for joining me today and for sharing so much wisdom and insight, so much care and compassion and support for our fellow educators. And really, in closing this time out, I want to remind folks that in the comments you see lots of resources for support, and that's really for me the key message here is you are not alone, and each one of us represents whole communities of people who are focused on how to help teachers do the incredibly difficult, important work that does take every bit of ourselves, and sometimes more. But there is so much support out there, so many resources. As we begin a new year, it's so wonderful to see in the comments so much hope that people are feeling about about the work ahead and about the possibilities. So we here at 6 Seconds, grateful to Kaylin, Margaret, Michael, and to all of you for joining us. And I send out my hope that we all have a smooth beginning of the year, filled with lots of hope, optimism, energy, those moments of joy and awe, along with the bumps in the road that always come. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you again, Michael, Kaylin, Margaret.
Thanks, everybody.
If this was helpful, would you please comment, like, share, and subscribe? The Emotional Intelligence Network is your community to grow and practice EQ. At 6 Seconds, that means being smarter with feelings. And we're here to provide practical, proven EQ tools so workplaces, schools, and people can thrive everywhere in the world. Be sure to visit 6seconds.org to find the complete suite of resources, assessments, and programs. Thank you for watching.